Hello, welcome back to the Edition podcast. I'm Charlotte Henry. Thank you to Clean My Mac from MacPaw for sponsoring this week's show. And thank you, Mark Stenberg from Adweek, for coming back to the show. I'm so thrilled to have you here. How are you?
I'm good. Always happy to come back on.
Yeah, it's been far too long. It's a shame, though, that you're coming on such a quiet week where there's nothing really happening in the world of digital media and media more broadly. So it's a quiet time, isn't it? Warner Brothers Discovery. We first had the Netflix bid come in and by all accounts be accepted. We then had David Ellison wasn't having it. And so we had a hostile bid from Paramount. And as we're recording this, something could happen by the time I've edited this and put it out. But that's where we stand at the moment where we're recording this. Where on earth does this go next, Mark?
It's such a good question. I was sort of saying to you, this is giving me flashbacks a little bit to when Ellison was first trying to acquire Paramount, and it turned into this multi-month saga. And some reporters I know almost start to get reticent to cover every twist and turn in it, because you start to think, oh, this is going to be, a long hike, and we're going to be covering a lot of different, twist to it. So your guess in many ways is as good as mine as to where this goes. I was just reading some of the latest stuff about the financial composition of the Paramount bid that involves a real coterie of characters and different sovereign investment funds and relatives of the president and everything. So I think there's a lot of different angles to parse it from. You have to wonder, on some level it comes down to, I feel like Netflix has more cash and that cash has fewer strings. But now you have Paramount putting up a larger offer, and it theoretically has the political agency by way of Jared Kushner, by way of the Ellison connection, etc. So on some level, it becomes what has more weight here, the ear of the president or the stronger financial deal. Trump himself has said, whoever pays the most should get it, which is classic art of the deal perspective on it. I don't know if he's going to sort of heed his own advice, but I think if it did come down to just a money thing, it'll be interesting to see how far Netflix will go to match Paramount, because Paramount obviously was the one who kicked this whole thing off. They're very intent on having this asset. Netflix, to me, seemed like they were sort of just responding to an opportunity. So if this really turns into a bidding war, how high is Netflix willing to go? Are they going to beat that $30 per share that the Ellisons just put up? That would be interesting to see.
And there is a fundamental difference, isn't there, between the two bids that I think is slightly getting lost, which is the Netflix bid is just for the Warner Brothers stuff, HBO and so on. The Paramount bid is for everything. It's for Discovery, Warner Brothers Discovery, the whole shooting match. Why do you think that is?
I think that Netflix knows that it wants no part of the cable industry. I think that it wants and the fact that Paramount does is almost sort of inexplicable. That was very counterintuitive. Yes. You have Comcast splitting into cable and streaming. You've got Warner Brothers splitting into cable and streaming. Everybody's thinking cable is throwing off cash, but it's a melting ice cube. Nobody wants to buy that. Here comes Ellison saying, no, we want the cable elements as well, because Paramount has a cable portfolio. Theoretically, they could combine, the MTVs of the world with the CNNs of the world and have a stronger cable portfolio that could be really cash generative for many more years. But Netflix's logic makes a lot more sense. Frankly, it's saying, look, we're only interested in the future of this business, not the past, no matter how lucrative it is at the moment. But that does... You have the Hollywood types who are sort of clutching their pearls, envisioning two different dystopic futures. One in which, both of these consolidation wise, you're going to have one fewer bidder for IP, for shows, etc. That is concerning, but that is just a byproduct of consolidation. So I don't see how you get around that. The concern with Netflix is that they'll stop putting Warner Brother movies in theaters, right? And so that has Hollywood types concerned. And then with Paramount,
do you think that? I'm not convinced that's realistic, because we know, and I know this from awful plug here, from researching my book Streaming Wars, out now, great holiday gift, that Netflix really cares about winning the awards. So at the worst, it is surely going to let those Warner Brothers movies go into theatres for at least the minimum time they need to get into the award ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
Surely.
And that's what they're saying. But you have their track record versus their promises, and nobody can know for sure. I would imagine like best case scenario, right? Like best case scenario, Netflix puts Warner Brothers movies in theaters for the exact same duration that they're in theaters today. More likely scenario, it's a reduced version of that. Worst case scenario, it's a fraction of that. You know what I mean? So it's hard to envision it being the same or better. Whereas like the case with Paramount is, okay, they have a studio business as well. They have a history of, showcasing those in theaters. If they were to end up in control of Warner Brothers, there's far less concern that that would be in jeopardy. But with both, it's, probably not going to be better in the future than it is now in terms of like theater showcasing.
There's so much to come in this story. I'll have you back in a few weeks when we find out more. Really, reason I wanted you here, well, there are many reasons I wanted to hang out with you, but the really sensible reason I wanted you on the show is to kind of do both highlights of the year and then look to 2026 and what we think might be coming. So you've covered so many stories this year, including in your new newsletter. What for you has stood out about 2025?
Yeah, thank you for the plug. On Background,
Always.
Great media newsletter once a week. Subscribe through Adweek.
And it comes out on a different day to the edition. So, you can read that and then you can read yours. Yeah.
I think there are a few big trends. The one for me that comes up constantly is going to be a subcategory of AI, but specifically the declining traffic that publishers are seeing from search. For the last few years, social traffic had been dwindling. This year, you really saw a drop off. I was talking to people from People Inc. the other day. They're saying the last 6 months, it really accelerated in terms of like that decline. So I think a lot of publishers will spin up a narrative about, Google's been sending less search, methodically over the last 15 years. This is just an incremental, but they're sort of saying that publicly, but then privately they're, preparing for Google Zero, seeing traffic declines of 10 to 40%. That's really material to their business. What I'm really curious about is at what point does that start to affect their subscription business, their commerce business, and not just their advertising business? So that's been huge. It's a sea change in sort of reading behaviors and consumption behaviors that then goes on to spark all these like downstream pivots from publishers where they're like, if we're not going to get traffic, the biggest thing that we're seeing is publishers are saying, okay, when we do get a visitor on site, we need to make sure they stay on the site way longer than normal. So we're using AI to improve recirculation, to make our site stickier. We're trying to be more pragmatic. We're leaning into all these other strategies to basically juice engagement. So that's huge. I think it's going to be a real extinction moment for a lot of independent.
Do you mean that sincerely? Like, actually, there will be websites and companies that own these websites that just go, we can't do this anymore, goodbye.
I think so. Unfortunately, I think a lot of independent publishers whose website is the front of their business and really the majority of their business, I think, are in for a really rough next 2 years. I mean, I just did this story. One sort of tranche of that is what happens to independent recipe bloggers, which I know are not like the backbone of the economy, but I think you Google chicken tzatziki recipe, you're going to get 5 pages of results, all from mom and pop independent publications. Those kinds of websites are really imperiled. And I think if you haven't spent the last few years building out your email list, building out a subscription list, building out social, building out video, building out events, like if you just are still like, we run a website and one website alone, you know what I mean? Like maybe you're People Inc. and you've got 40 of the biggest websites on the earth, that's different. But if you are an independent website operator, yeah, you're looking at a tough road to hoe.
Oh, well, you've really cheered me up. Thank you so much. That's really great to go into the holiday season feeling so uplifted. Thank you.
Well, you've got I mean, you built your product as a subscription product with an email. So those are I don't want to be, to be callous here, but if you have made it to 2026 and you still don't have any other sort of like distribution vehicle other than hopefully people find us on search, then you've not really kept up with the times. And frankly, I am not going to shed too many tears.
Talk to me about the conversations about AI you've had this year, because I imagine that almost all your conversations almost every day don't take very long to get to the phrase AI.
Yeah.
Tell me what's been happening there, what publishers have been doing this year to move in with the times, essentially.
Yeah, I think that related to what I was just saying is this idea of like, okay, how are publishers going to be compensated? How can they be paid when their data is ingested by LLMs and then regurgitated to provide answers in these different answer engines? That conversation has been on the tips of everyone's tongues. How can we get paid? You've got like 15 one-off deals that OpenAI has done with like Axel Springer and The Atlantic and the Financial Times, but 99% of content creators and website creators have not been paid, and there's no system in process for them to be paid. So tracking developments on that front has been really interesting to me and something I've had a lot of conversations about.
Yeah. What do you make of the legal battles? Because I've seen different deals have been done and not done, but there have also been some pretty raucous legal battles. You mentioned the New York Times, for example. They've been pretty robust in their stance, particularly towards OpenAI, am I right? And ChatGPT in particular. How do you see how that has played out this year?
Frankly, unfortunately, there's not been much of an update. I mean, a lot of the updates on that front are the lawsuit has not been dismissed. You know what I mean? Or like, so it's like it's still working its way through the courts. And I think OpenAI is obviously, and all these others, Perplexity's been sued by a number of publications. It's a multi-year saga. And I think, unfortunately, like I'm so grateful to those publications for doing that. But you really start to do this thing where you're like, the world is so different from when even that lawsuit was first filed to when it could presumably be close to finishing. And the political administration has obviously proven itself to be typically more on the side of AI than on, content creators. So I don't have a lot of hope that it's some sort of sea change victory for content creation. Although it is
I'm
the
looking at
chance still
Mark
stands.
furious that he keeps being so miserable.
Yeah, it's
Well, I blame you, frankly.
it's TBD. We have to see how that like pans out. But if I were a betting man, I don't think that the courts are going to find this process of ingesting and regurgitating content to be fully in abrogation of copyright law and say back it all up. You know what I mean? Undo the last 3 years of AI development. I think more likely what we're going to see is, I was talking to a good source about this last week, on some level, these models are going to keep getting more sophisticated, but the volume of data that exists for them to ingest and train on doesn't grow exponentially. In fact, you could argue that they've largely trained on the available data. So there's conversations about like synthetic data and that kind of thing.
However many decades of internet data compared to, well, it will be now months because that they will get in future, right?
Exactly. So the question then becomes, how much better are these answer engines going to get? You know what I mean? I think there had been a lot of concern over they're going to be, agentic avatars are going to replace. And it's like, we've seen like a real plateauing of some of the evolution of these models. I think Jim and I came out and was the most impressive of the bunch recently, but the latest model from ChatGPT was somewhat underwhelming. And I think that there's a real reason to believe that without vast new troves of training data to be unlocked, and with publishers starting to link arms and block bots and demand payment for crawling, we're starting to see the access to that available data constrict as well. So there's a real question as to maybe these answer engines do have to start paying if they want continued access to quality data to allow their models to continue to improve. So I think that there's an argument to be made that we might be on the cusp of maybe in the next year starting to see a marketplace for data scraping to exist. And then that maybe changes the narrative about how sustainable it is still to be an independent publisher. But a lot of ifs.
Interesting. We'll come to the future in a minute. What's been your favorite story that you've covered this year and written this year?
Great question. I think, man, I have a few of them, but I will say, I think that it's been a really one sort of story or trend that like kind of encapsulates a lot of sub trends has been, I've called this like a coming out year for creator media in many ways. To give you a more encouraging trend
Thank you.
For yourself specifically. I think like whatever your thoughts are on the Free Press, it being acquired for $150 million is kind of a watermark moment for like, this was a Substack blog 4 years ago.
Yeah, but except...
Go ahead.
What? So I agree with you to a point, but the thing about that is it's still gone. I built this huge thing, but actually what we need is Daddy to come in and give us 150 million quid and go take us back into the big house.
So I completely agree. I think the free press it's on the spectrum, but there are other different success stories that I think reflect different possible routes forward. I think you've seen like the success of the Bulwark, or even like a Feed Me or a Dispatch, all offering interesting signals. I think one trend that I'm like kind of still waiting to write a story about is this new like hybrid model that we're seeing between like, you see like, I've seen it specifically with like Alex Heath and Casey Newton, but even like Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher a little bit, where they're like technically independent creators, but then they partner with existing publishers. Even you could say, I would imagine this is in the future for an Ezra Klein or even the Odd Lots people at Bloomberg, or like there's a thinking of, rather than going fully solo, you kind of go solo, but then you strike a partnership with the publisher where they do the sales or the marketing or the distribution, the sort of like unsexy business element of it all. And then you end up more with this like creator network, a la the kind that Vox Media is really at work on building. Yeah. And it strikes an interesting balance between, you get sort of the benefits of being solo, but you get the benefits of having some infrastructure behind you to do the unsexy bits of running a business. So
and we have started to see that trend this year, haven't we?
Yeah. And I think keeping an eye on that will be really interesting. And then sort of like related to that, if I had like one other big trend bucket that a lot of things fall into, it's just like the year that video ate the internet kind of thing. I think like you're seeing a lot more publishers embrace social video. I think, you've seen the Times and the Washington Post roll out vertical video feeds on their app, again, sort of like replicating TikTok. With podcasts, which are now vodcasts, there's actually some data coming out on Wednesday, and I think us being on this podcast sort of exemplifies it. 71% of podcasts now have video elements. Yeah. Only 29% are audio only. I don't know how that switched year over year, but I have to imagine it's a pretty dramatic change, especially from 2 years ago. So I think that has had massive implications for how people find new podcasts and learn about new creators. And then I think the really interesting thing that I wrote a story about a few weeks ago was like, I think this positions YouTube as if it needed more advantages to be more of a central figure in the media space. And I wrote a story that's like, it's going to be the next big media incubator. What Substack was over the next few years, you're now seeing creators, even like journalism creators like Taylor Lorenz and Tara Palmieri and Dave Jorgensen and Nicholas Carlson say, I'm starting a new media business. My homepage is going to be YouTube. And so I think that's a really interesting.
It's absolutely fascinating. We'll look to the future in a minute, but I just want to thank Clean My Mac from MacPaw for sponsoring this show. This week's episode is sponsored by Clean My Mac. I'm thrilled they're supporting this show because I'm a big fan of the product. During the holiday season, people bake cookies, share treats, and wrap up work before the year ends. It's also when Macs get overloaded with digital cookies, cache files, and system junk piling up after months of use. The season's warmth meets its busiest tech moment. Holiday joy collides with digital clutter. Clean My Mac clears the wrong cookies so you can enjoy the right ones. Holidays taste better without Mac junk on the menu. Clean My Mac is your digital cookie cutter for a fresh start. The wrong cookies slow down your Mac. The right ones sweeten your holidays. And Clean My Mac has helped me keep my machines running smoothly for years. Get tidy today. Try 7 days free and use my code ADDITION for 20% off at clnmy.com/ADDITION. That's clnmy.com/addition, ADDITION, all uppercase. Thanks to Clean My Mac for supporting the show. So then, let's look ahead to the new year. What's the big story of 2026? You don't get to say AI, because that's been the story of 2025. I always joke that the metaverse and crypto were the stories of 2024, and then the 1st of January 2025, everyone got changed to talking about AI. What's going to be the new thing in 26?
I think it continues to be from a media perspective. I think the sort of two major extensions of trends that I just talked about, the creatorification of media, both in terms of how we talked about these sort of creator-publisher partnerships. I think we're going to see more of those. I think we're going to see publishers treating their top talent more like creators. I think they're going to continue to put more faces on videos and create more social video and have more podcasts. And basically institutions that were sort of faceless and nameless for a long time are increasingly following the lead of influencers and saying, we have to lead with personality. We have to put people on camera. And we're going to see that become more foregrounded in their offerings. I
Yeah,
also think that
I do agree with that.
Well, I think an interesting corollary to that ties with this sort of videoification thing is I'm always trying to think of like, okay, I don't know how it is for you. If you look at my feed nowadays, it's a million different videos. They're often like very amateur, which is theoretically a draw. I think what we're going to start seeing is publishers creating social video that more closely resembles what news shows used to look like. Or basically, we're going to see the quality of those social video productions continue to increase and be produced at a more rapid pace. So I think like your social feeds are going to look more like TV. And I think that publishers, their contributions to that are going to be those products or those outputs are going to look more like premium news television. So I think that could be an interesting trend. I'll say on a more depressing note, I think that consolidation is going to continue. I think specifically lifestyle media. If you're a lifestyle media publisher and you don't have some sort of B2B arm or you don't have some sort of professional audience that you're serving, like I think Vogue's done a relatively admirable job of saying, okay, we're going to have Vogue Professional or something like that. Like if you are just catering to fashion or lifestyle or health and wellness or whatever, that is increasingly the domain of social media creators. So if you're a publisher, unless you're dominated on social media or unless you are serving an audience that is willing to pay for information, I think we're going to see the Condé Nasts and the Hearsts and the others of their ilk shutter a lot more of this sort of second tier publications in those portfolios. The big ones, there's 2 to 3 lifestyle publishers in every category are going to make it and they're going to get really big. But I think the also rans are going to really see the end of their road in the next year or so. So a little sad.
For me, I think next year, I agree with you about the creatification of media. For one thing, I think we're seeing that already. You mentioned Kara Swisher, Scott Galloway, Emily Stenberg, Ezra Klein. I think how many people that watch or listen to the Ezra Klein show know he's actually a New York Times columnist? I would get not as many that know about his podcast. I would guess there's a significant proportion of his listeners / viewers that do not know he's a New York Times columnist. I would guess.
Yeah.
And so I think that is going to matter. I think personality and personal connection really does matter. But I also wonder if publishers have actually learnt from the past. And are we going to see that in 2026? Whereby, we gave up everything to Facebook and the infamous pivot to video. They gave up everything to the social platforms more broadly. Oh my God, you've got to pump everything out on Twitter because it's going to send all the links this way until Elon Musk decides he doesn't want to send links your way anymore. And I wonder if in 2026, people are going to do a bit more, for example, what Nilay Patel has done at The Verge and gone, no, if you want The Verge, you have to come to theverge.com. And we have a dedicated enough fan base in an important enough niche that actually we can get away with that. I think it's very hard, and I think it's particularly hard for general news outlets. And we've seen that already. But I wonder if in next year, people are going to go, yeah, we need to be where people are, but also they need to come to us because we can't just hand it over to people who can tweak an algorithm at any given moment. I hope we see in 26 that people have actually learnt from their mistakes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I mean, that has been a constant source of tension in the media industry for at least the last decade. Do you fish where the fish are, or do you try to get the fish back to your pond? And I think like a lot of publishers have said, yeah, we'll do both at the same time. I think that I actually was at a panel a few months ago, and somebody asked me, I was telling this story. The Dallas Morning News got bought by Hearst for like $88 million. They'd been independently owned for 140 years. I was talking to their CEO. I said, why sell now? And he basically said AI. And I said, y'all were around when the internet came to be. Y'all were around when social media came to be. You didn't sell then. Sort of what's different about AI. And the feeling was, whereas those two elements, those two innovations sort of opened up new markets, the advent of AI really feels like it's closing down or reducing the size of the open internet. And that's the real concern. And so I've always been an advocate for like create content that makes people need to come to your website. But I think you're starting to see publishers, I would say, increasingly kind of face the music and say, it's getting really hard for people to come to our website. We're seeing fewer people come to our website. We need to go to those places where they are and set up camp there. And I think you see this with like the Daily Beast. They treat Substack as a different surface area for them to sell into.
Yes.
And they treat YouTube as a different area. And the idea of like website as home base is going to go. I actually have that as one of my trends. I said sort of the open web becomes more showcase than storefront. It's where maybe a small percentage of your audience goes, your content lives there, it communicates a brand message if someone's looking for you. But I see this as like publishers increasingly being, imagine you don't have a website, imagine that the internet doesn't exist. You're distributed. You have podcasts, you have newsletters, you have social, you're on YouTube. And of course, you still have your website, but the idea, especially with the way answer engines are changing consumer habits, the idea that like you're going to get many people to your website needs to be kind of a nice to have rather than a necessity for your business.
I suspect you're going to be proven right. And I think that's a real shame because not just because I grew up in the era of the open internet and I like browsing different websites or whatever. That's fine. I understand I'm an outlier. But I think it's also giving up. And I think it's succumbing to a trend where we should have learned already not to just succumb to trends. Now, I think AI is different to social media trends because there will be things in pretty much any industry where AI will be transformative at least to a point. But if you're just giving up and saying, no, we don't need people to come to our website, we're going to allow these other platforms to dictate who sees our work, how they see our work, when they see our work, I think you're asking for trouble.
Yeah. And I will say like this sort of, I didn't mention this, it goes unsaid, but it shouldn't. We're seeing a lot of publishers launch apps.
Yeah.
That was literally the subject of my last newsletter. I don't know why I haven't brought it up until now, but like that is absolutely a knock-on implication of all of this. And that's, I don't think that's not a giving up. That's saying, okay, people aren't going to go to our website, but if we push them to our app and, then we control that experience, the circulation rates are way greater, the conversion rates are greater. So I think I was talking to somebody who works in SEO the other day, and she was saying, it's become a greater priority than ever to push people to app because it's just getting so hard for people to find you in search. So that's a way of sort of like splitting the baby a little bit. You're maybe saying to yourself, the website might be a thing in the past, but people coming to our destination to consume our content, that doesn't have to change. It just might be app instead of website.
Yeah, and that doesn't matter if it's a newsletter archive because people can't find you in their inbox. I'm just always skeptical. And I do think in 2026, people are I hope they're going to plant their flag in the ground a bit and say, no, this is where we are. Yeah, we post a newsletter on Substack as well. Yeah, you can follow our YouTube video feed because it's the best place to publish video. But really, you want the full experience. Come to us. Yeah, subscribe to the newsletter as well, etc., etc., etc. And it will be about, as you've hinted at from last year or this year, 2026 is also going to have to be about building connections between the audience. One thing is for sure, whatever I think or like, you're not in 2026 going to get away with hoping someone puts your search term into Google and clicks to your website. You are going to have to build a loyalty, an audience, and a connection with that audience.
Well, and I will say, like, on the website argument, I think a really relevant trend that we're seeing. So AI gets sort of positioned in so many ways as threat, and in many ways it is, but it is also opportunity. And you're specifically seeing that. I've got a story probably coming out tomorrow about Time Magazine that has struck this big partnership over the last year with like a transformation agency. They re-architected all their data so that it can be more easily accessed. And that took 6 months or so. And now they're using that data to build out all these bespoke AI products that live on their website. They're basically redesigning the site to be far stickier. And they've seen a 22% increase in ad revenue, a 53% increase in user engagement, nearly a tripling of homepage revenue. And I think you've seen this with other sites too. The Verge, which you mentioned, did a site redesign specifically to make it stickier. I've seen this with Apartment Therapy. You're seeing this with a lot of leading publishers where they're saying Newsweek did a big redesign that's got AI kind of infused into every element of it. They're saying, yes, we're going to get fewer visitors, but using AI, we can do a way better job of determining what this individual user likes very quickly and then show them a lot more of that content. And whether it's even using like answer engines on site, like USA Today has this widget that's created by an ad tech company where, and now Time has this too, you're on the site and you can interact with it like a chat GPT, but it's only giving you answers from the data that the website has kind of thing. So it's like Time's giving you. So basically we're saying, okay, if fewer people are visiting websites, sure, but we can use this technology to make sure that each one of those visits counts for a lot more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And my final prediction is I think we're still going to see a continuing growth in connection to physical media. I think as everything becomes AI-fied and sort of much more slop, I think people are going to really want tangible stuff, from whether it's the vinyl records that are behind me, the magazines that are cluttering up my flat, whatever. I think people are going to grow a bigger connection to physical media as well. My other prediction is, of course, that Mark Stenberg will be back next year. He's not going to escape for so long this time. I'm so grateful to have you, Mark. How can people keep up with you?
You can just find my work on adweek.com. I write the newsletter On Background, which you can subscribe to, and then follow me on Instagram. I'm no longer even promoting my Twitter at this point.
Wow.
Follow me on Instagram. Yeah, Mark Stenberg 3.
It's quite fun. I enjoy seeing your sort of various sporting and eating journeys over on Instagram. I'm Charlotte Henry, and you can follow me at Charlotte A. Henry across almost every social media platform, and head to theedition.net. Yes, the website where you can read newsletter archives, blog posts, see videos and so on, and subscribe to the newsletter there, which I hope you do. And my latest book, Streaming Wars, is out as well, so I hope you pick that up from wherever you get your books. Thank you once again, Mark. And I'll see you all next year, because this is the last show proper for 2025. There'll be a TV Plus talk come out, but this is the last show like this. So have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.